Hey guys, so they announced a new class for Diablo 4 at BlizzCon, the Rogue, which I think comes as no surprise to us. I think either it was going to be a toss-up between a dexterity-based class like the Rogue or a plate-wearing class like the Paladin. The interesting thing though about the Rogue is that everyone's idea of the Rogue can be a little bit different. Some people think of the Rogue as primarily a bow-wielding class, while others think of them as a up close and personal dagger wielding cutthroat type class. And in Diablo 4, it's going to be a mixture of the both. So the rogue will have access to daggers and swords for melee weapons and bows and crossbows for ranged weapons. Another design philosophy they chose for Diablo 4 was making the rogue highly mobile. So they can dash in, attack their opponents, they can dash back out and drop caltrops. They have Shadow Step, which teleports the character straight to an enemy, which is right out of World of Warcraft. And you'll actually see in this video and another video I'll be making on the open world and PvP, there is some ideas they seem to be pulling from multiple games, like World of Warcraft and Heroes of the Storm, actually. And so make sure you keep a lookout for my other video on the PvP and open world concepts. And once I have that done, I'll link that in the video as well. The developers also talked about added customization options that you can use on the rogue, like having scars and tattoos. And I think it's probably safe to assume that you'll have similar customization options open on other classes as well. Perhaps the most unique thing about the rogue is the specializations. The developer specifically said that they wanted every class in the game to have that one hook that makes the player want to re-roll to that specific class. And for the rogue, it's these specializations. The rogue has 3 different specializations to pick from. You will do class-specific quests with one of the rogue groups around the world to pick your specialization, and no other class in the game gets access to these quests. And the 3 different rogue groups are the Sisterhood of the Sightless Eye, the Mercenaries of Kyrgyzstan, or the Outlaw Smugglers of the Swamps in Hawazar. The first specialization we'll look at are the combo points. They act very similar to the combo points in World of Warcraft, where your basic attacks now add combo points. Certain skills will consume these combo points for additional effects. And you can see in the video, whenever the rogue uses multi-shot, the more combo points they have, it looks like the more arrows they shoot, and more of the Mirage archers off to the side show up. The next specialization, Shadow Realm, allows the rogue to pull enemies into the Shadow Realm with them for 5 seconds, where you become stealthed, unstoppable, and deal increased damage to those enemies that are pulled in with you. I think this ability would be really good to snipe off a rare mob that you're having trouble with, or maybe separating a champion pack that's really strong and killing them one at a time using Shadow Realm. I actually think that this is one of the more interesting specializations that the rogue has access to. And lastly, there's Exploit Weakness. You can exploit certain enemy attacks. All the hits against these enemies become critical strikes and deal 60% increased damage. Enemies will randomly get a mark above their head, and the player needs to react fast enough to attack those enemies to gain the benefits of Exploit Weakness. So the player here is going to have to look out for these markers above the enemy's head and try to react as quickly as possible to get the damage benefit of Exploit Weakness. It's hard to tell in the video when they show it off. It looks like that the rogue is constantly teleporting to the enemy that has a marker above their head, but that could just be the ability Shadow Step that the rogue has access to, or it could just be or it could be Exploit Weakness itself. Maybe Exploit Weakness is giving them a free teleport to that enemy. It's hard to tell. They didn't really give us enough information. I think though it's more likely that the person playing the rogue was probably using the Shadow Step ability. But yeah, we'll just have to wait and see. I also feel like if it's not automatically teleporting you to the character, that this particular specialization could be pretty difficult to make use of in on a console like Xbox or PlayStation or something like that. I feel like it'd be kind of hard to specifically snipe them out, but I've also never played Diablo 3 on a console, so maybe it's easier than I think it is. Perhaps the coolest thing about the specializations is that since you can already choose to be a melee or ranged rogue or a hybrid of the both, this kind of opens up a lot of variation, because you can be a melee rogue that uses combo points, or a ranged rogue that uses Exploit Weakness, or a hybrid rogue that uses Shadow Realm, and a combination of any of those things. So it opens a lot of different paths for build customization and just like player playstyle. And the last thing the developers talked about was the rogue's imbue system, where they can imbue their abilities with different elemental attacks like frost, poison, or shadow. And they said elemental attacks at the front, and they harkened back to Diablo 2's mercenaries in Act 1, where the rogues you could hire could have fire arrows, frost arrows, and so on. And so it makes me wonder, they only mentioned frost, poison, and shadow in the video, but it makes me wonder if they'll have access to more than that in the actual completed game. They also said you can't have more than one imbue up at a time, but you would be able to stack different ailments if you wanted to. So if you had the frost imbue and you shot an enemy with that and then switched to a poison imbue, you could stack the poison on top of the frozen enemy or chilled enemy at the same time. So one of the more interesting things they talked about related to the frost imbues is, or just frost in general, is that chills can stack. Meaning if you're playing with a sorceress and you're a rogue using your frost imbue and the sorceress is using some of her cold abilities, the chills on the enemies will actually stack faster, leading up to freezes on them happening quicker. This does seem really interesting. I feel like for PvP, it could be a little overpowered. I could see a lot of people just using frost abilities and just freezing everybody. But I think that all comes down to maybe how resistances work, which, you know, in my previous video, we talked about resistances a little bit, and I don't know how complicated they're going to be in this game, because I think they might be going down the road of Diablo 3 resistances, where you just kind of stack them indefinitely or try to get as much of it as possible instead of having the like 75% cap that you would normally get in a game like Diablo 2 or Path of Exile. So I think it'll just be really interesting to see how that actually plays out when the game is released. And at the very end of the Rogue trailer, I haven't seen anyone else mention this, and maybe this isn't really anything worth mentioning, but I thought it was pretty cool. It looks like they show Andariel being fought or killed, or something's going on, but to me it looks just like Andariel. You guys will have to let me know what you think in the comments, but I thought it was pretty awesome. And that's pretty much all the information they released on the Rogue. And I think the Rogue looks really interesting. The gameplay is strange, that all the gameplay they showed looks slow, looks really slow, which isn't a bad thing, but the Rogue was jumping around using its abilities, and it was taking them a very long time to just kill a few enemies here and there. It didn't seem like the Rogue had this like, oh, it felt powerful at any moment. And they kept showing off the Rain of Arrows ability. You're like, look at the Rogue dismounting using Rain of Arrows. Look how awesome it is. And they kept showing that off, and they only showed a handful of abilities multiple times, which makes me think that they're either very early on in development with the Rogue, and there's a lot left to be done in terms of just class development, like maybe more abilities to be added in, or that's it, right? Like that's going to be all there is to the class, or those handful of abilities, and you'll just be able to augment them with maybe the offshoot legendary or your skill tree or something. I really hope it's, you know, that they just have more development that needs to be done on the character. But all in all, I think it's really cool. I like the idea of them using melee and ranged, and so you can choose yourself the way you want to play as a dexterity-based character. I really like that, instead of them just kind of forcing you into one role. And I'm really glad that they decided to go with the Rogue from D1 and D2. I think that's actually really cool. I knew before they announced it, I knew it was going to be the Rogue, because they made the developer made some sort of reference to D1. I was like, it's going to be the Rogue, definitely the Rogue. And then, yeah, lo and behold, it was the Rogue. And I'm glad it is. I think it's a really great choice. I knew there was no way it was going to be the Amazon, because, you know, they're doing the male and female classes. And so I knew that wasn't going to happen. But yeah, I had no idea which direction they were going to go. I'm really glad it wasn't the Demon Hunter, that's for sure. Thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. And if you like the video, make sure to subscribe and keep an eye out for more Diablo related content. In the meantime, take it easy.